The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
We just came from the premiere of Duty to Disobey.
Unbelievable film.
It'll really wake some people up.
Tell all your friends to go because this movie is an absolute must-see.
It's amazing.
Be prepared to have your eyes open.
It'll shock you to your core.
Until you see this film, you really don't understand the gravity of what these folks went through and the impossible decisions that them and their families had to make.
It's an excellent movie. I recommend everybody watch it.
This was a really great movie and a very powerful movie. And it's also a very heartbreaking movie.
The Pentagon is going to require vaccines for all service members.
Leaders did everything legal or illegal within their power to coerce and influence their service members to get the shot.
Military members are expected to just roll up their sleeves and get any and all shots that the government mandates.
They didn't get the licensed COVID shots that they were told that they were getting. And that was illegal, and they stood up for their rights. They stood up for the Constitution. They had a duty under the military code to stand up.
In the military, we are oath-bound to obey lawful orders. However, when those orders are not lawful, we are duty-bound to disobey.
Soldiers were psychologically tortured, were isolated, thrown in the break because they wouldn't get the shot, attempted to be forced vaccinated. It's a critical movie that the whole nation needs to see.
There are so many injustices, so many wrongs that need to be righted.
8,000 well-trained men and women were fired.
I lost my ability to feed my family.
I mean, I'm being told you're getting dishonorably discharged.
Seeing a movie like this is absolutely critical.
I have a tremendous amount of admiration for all of the people who took courageous stances and said no.
At some point, the tables turn, and those who protect us need protection and defense.
This should never be allowed to happen again. And honestly, there needs to be accountability.
We need more of this to come out now like never before.
And if you keep saying yes when you shouldn't, you will not be able to say no when you should.
We see what happens in the absence of compassion and in the absence of love. Everything falls apart.
These are the finest among us. The injustice caused by the response to the pandemic is large.
And if people don't listen, we're going to keep repeating this problem over and over again.
If this is something that's going to happen to the military, that the civilian population are the next ones to come.
What happens in the U.S. military, which comprises over 1 million people, ultimately does happen in the general population. This is what is in store unless we turn it around.
If you care about America, if you care about the world, if you love our military, if you love family, you have to see this movie.
It is not conjecture, it's not conspiracy theory, it's there, the evidence is there, the people are real.
Please go see it, have an open mind.
Take some friends with you, share it with others. This is something that's critically important for our entire nation to see.
It's a must watch.
Go out and see it. It's coming to a theater near you.
Good Morning America, live June 30th. It is the theatrical premiere today of Duty to Disobey, a film that I've had the honor to see already 3 times. I'm going to see it a 4th tonight. I'm seeing it in Long Island, New York. It's showing in Manhattan in New York City as well, too, in 113, some say 130 locations. I don't have the exact amount. It's a lot. Make sure you are finding your premiere. You can still buy tickets. You need to buy in advance. Go to dutytodisobeyfilm.com. Buy tickets, and you can reserve your tickets now. The ticket's $20, a small processing fee. Get it now. Make sure you have your seat reserved. At my screening in Long Island, I'm going to be there with John Gilmore and Rita Palma for a roundtable discussion after the fact about the film, as well as about New York medical freedom issues. So make sure that you're coming out. And right now, it is my honor to bring on the director of Duty to Disobey, the legendary Brian Burrows. Brian, thanks for joining me on CHD TV today. How are you?
I'm good, Michael. How are you? Very excited.
Very good. Very
good.
Very good. Very excited today. But first, for those who don't know, Brian, please let people know your filmography, what you've done as a director, as an artist, especially the films related to medical freedom.
Yeah, my background was in 3D animation, and I started working on big motion pictures. I got to work on some of Robert Rodriguez's films. I was actually on the set of Spy Kids 4 when the producer told me to go meet somebody that needed somebody that had my that needed somebody that had my skill set, and I ended up going, and this is in 2009, and sat across the table from Andy Wakefield, who needed somebody to film and edit and do graphics, and the rest was history. And we just started making, we made a show about autistic kids and how to kind of bring them out of autism at the time. And then we moved on, and he told me about his friend Brian Hooker, who was in conversation with a guy from the CDC called Dr. William Thompson, and thus Vaxxed was born. And it's been a wild ride ever since. In 2019, we put out Vaxxed 2, which followed Polly's incredible journey on her bus that promoted Vaxxed for the first, I think she was on the road for 18 months, just interviewing people, not just parents of injured kids, but kids of parents whose kids they didn't vaccinate, and then doctors who had started seeing things in their practices that they couldn't put together. And then they heard about this film Vaxxed and came out and watched it and wanted to come and talk to Polly. So and Bobby Kennedy was executive producer on that film. And so that's how we got hooked up with CHD TV, and kind of the rest is history.
So vaccine injury is something that's not new to you at all. You've covered this in the legendary films, the Vaxxed series. For those who didn't know that, thanks for educating on that. But now adult vaccine mandates, the COVID crisis, those who refused and lost their job, which is akin to me. I lost my job as a special ed teacher in New York City because I refused the shot. But it was worse for the soldiers, and we'll get into that. And also those who complied and were injured, catastrophically injured, permanently disabled. What was the genesis of this film? How did this first start out? How'd you get pulled in? Who came to you with the idea? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, as you know, CHD has an incredible military chapter led by Pam Long, who's just, you'll see her when you go watch this film tonight. She's just an amazing patriot. And she had contacted Toby and I, Toby's Polly's son, who's our producer on all of our films, and had broached the idea of this film with us. And right off the bat, I wasn't sure, because it wasn't really something that we did. It wasn't really in our wheelhouse. But then Polly had a call with the military chapter, and she got off the phone afterwards and called me right away. And she says, Brian, we have to make this film. And so, we agreed, okay, let's take a look at it. And through a lot of the back and forth and the ideas that Pam had about, the story and how to kind of tell this story, we agreed to do it. And I'll tell you, Michael, from the very first day of shooting interviews, we met 3 service members, and I was just blown away by their courage. A lot of people can say that they stand up for things, but when your livelihood, your ability to feed your family, your retirement being taken away is on the table, a lot of people shrink in that. And the people that we interviewed that first day, I was just blown away. And I remember saying to Polly, as I was driving home that day, I called her and I said, we have got to do this and do it right. We've got to do right by these people. They're just, as you just saw Ron Johnson say, the best of us. They really are. That was sort of the beginning of this. And we filmed, I think, 38 service members for this film. And they were all, each one after another, were just such incredible people.
Yeah, Brian, I agree. As I said, I've seen this film multiple times now. It just hits to the core. I too was standing in the streets of New York City fighting the COVID shot mandate. I lost my job as a special ed teacher. My retirement to this day is still ruined. I know teachers with master's degrees driving Uber, living in their parents' basement, divorced, families ruined. So this what happened in the military happened much wider, especially in big cities. But the thing that happened in the military that didn't happen to me and shocked me, and everybody who dealt with a vaccine mandate, an adult vaccine mandate, must see this. The thing that shocked me was well, you must be crazy if you don't want to get this vaccine. That was a play that was used by military brass. They would say people were crazy. They would isolate people. They threw people in the brig, literally. And actually, let's cue this up, Lou. There was even a protocol put in place for involuntary immunization, forced vaccination against will. Let's show that clip of Teresa Long from the movie.
My first couple of weeks as the brigade surgeon, I got an email. Unit personnel will use only as much force as necessary to assist medical personnel with the involuntary immunization of soldiers. Has the command lost its mind? I said, that's by definition medical rape. I'm not getting the vaccine, so who's going to hold me down?
So now, as a teacher, I dealt with a lot. I faced a lot. I did not face that. I did not face that moment of people with power over me, even insinuating they were going to physically hold me down, lock me down, isolate me. So as bad as it's been for teachers, firefighters, cops, and we have a whole community in New York City and across the country, that shocked even me. When I first heard about that stuff, Brian, as it was happening in 2021, I thought it was like lore. I thought it was like lies, but it's not. It's completely true. Soldier after soldier after soldier documents it in this film, and it even me fighting for this so hard, it like shook me to the core to see that, to hear about that.
Yeah. I mean, the bullying that took place, it went beyond coercion. I mean, when these people, always talk about being in a foxhole with your buddy. I mean, that's what you trust the next soldier up with your life.
Yes.
And so when they're turning soldiers against soldiers and getting them to, hold their soldiers down, and, just like we always, the military are the reason for our freedom, and every 4th of July and all of these holidays, we laud them for the reason we have our freedom. To me, it was so crazy to think that they were the ones who had no choice in the matter. All of their freedoms were just stripped away. And it's one of the reasons we really wanted to do this film and really get across that these people really stood up and did the right thing, and the way they were treated was just horrible.
Yeah, and it brings up another clip, the lost trust in leadership. What does it take to have courage, moral courage, when you're facing these things? Lou, let's show that clip where soldiers are talking about losing their trust in their leaders.
And a lot of the people who I would want in a foxhole next to me, who would be some of the most vicious killers, fighters out there, are the most morally cowardice, careerist people you'd ever engage, who will do anything and step over anybody in order to get ahead.
When that trust begins to erode, when you lose trust in your leadership, there is something that happens, and you step back and you go, why didn't they protect me? That's a moral injury. And oh, by the way, that's a compensable injury within the VA.
It can be physical courage, that's combat, right? You can stand up to something, and we can do that really well. But when it comes to moral courage, that's harder for people, really is.
I think if I had not been pregnant, I wouldn't have had a second thought. I would have rolled up my sleeve and moved on. But because of my pregnancy, that really gave me pause.
It is a very difficult thing to stand up to, and it requires a muscle.
like a spiritual muscle.
Spiritual muscle. That really gets at me, because going through those dark days of COVID where I was getting fired, where we were marching over the Brooklyn Bridge, where we were in courts at the Capitol, all of those things. I mean, even my father, who raised me to be rebellious, who raised me to question everything, at one point said to me, like, come on, what's the big deal? Get the shot. Come on. Come on. What are you gonna? He was so scared about his son losing his job, losing his security. And I understand that. But I was kind of like, this, this is what you get, Dad. This is what you did. I mean, you raised me, you raised me to question authority and to be this person. And we were in Washington, D.C. As this opened up with the exit interviews, where Ron Johnson was there, Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo was there, and look at all these amazing warriors of conscience on stage. Even a member of DOW, Department of War, Sonny Duncan, was up there in his official capacity. When you talk to these individuals, when you relate to them, when you hear their stories, you definitely feel that spiritual muscle. You definitely feel these are exactly the person, exactly the people you would want to be in a foxhole with, if God forbid it ever came down to that. So just truly amazing people. Brian, I'm not even sure what my question is here, but if you any comments that you have to that.
I think that's what it takes, to have something else bigger than you, and you need that to really stand up against all this tyranny. I mean, if you don't have that, I mean, what strength do you have behind you? I always say, the support that we get from our family and friends, when you go up and you start making films about the government and painting them in a bad light, and going up against the pharmaceutical industry and now the Department of War, like, you need something behind you in order to keep going and keep persevering. And each one of the soldiers that we interviewed, they all had belief in, like, a higher power. And I wasn't sure, like, oh, do we want to make the film kind of about that? And I remember walking around my neighborhood at the beginning of making this film, and it just kind of came to me. It's like, this is their film. It's not yours. Tell the film the way that they told it to you. So, I have that written on a little whiteboard in my office. But they did. They all had this belief in God or whatever it was that really made them do the right thing. I mean, I'm so still blown away by the courage and the bravery of these people. And I think anybody who watches this film tonight is going to I really hope that comes across. Just incredible people.
That's fantastic. As a filmmaker, to be able to let go of the process like that and to trust your subject, to be able to say, no, they're going to take me on the journey. They're going to tell me what the narrative is. Oh, that's rare. Making films. I mean, I'm a musician. I'm an artist. I mean, ego's a part of it. It just is for any artist and what you're doing and my art and my vision. But I think you nailed it. I mean, and I saw the film, so I know that you nailed it, to be able to trust in them to take you on the journey of what their trials and their struggles and ultimately victories. There's a lot of victories. There is a real win in this. I find that remarkable. And I want to speak to other fired workers out there and the vaccine injured. Anybody out there, if you've been fired over a COVID shot, if you took the shot and you were injured, military, police, teacher, private, whatever, wherever you work, you must support this film. If you don't support this film, that's it. There's no more films about this. If this film isn't successful and doesn't get notice and isn't a financial success and all the things that you need in a film, who's going to pitch the fired workers in New York City film? Who's going to make that? Who's going to tell those stories if we don't stand with our men and women in uniform, with the warriors of conscience, who said no, and those who were tricked and treated horribly, and were injured because they did get the shot, did get the vaccine. Brian, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to be at the theater in Long Island. We have a roundtable discussion happening after with medical freedom leaders here in New York, John Gilmore, myself, Rita Palma. New York City, Manhattan is also having a screening. We have a couple other screenings throughout New York, over 100, maybe as many as 130 across the nation. Where are you going to be, Brian? Are you lucky enough to have a theater close enough to you that you're going to be checking it out at?
Yeah, Polly, Tommy, Toby, Tommy, and I, we have a screening here in Austin, and that's at 7:00 tonight in the Lakeline AMC. Yeah, should be a lot of fun. I mean, this is one of those nights. You know, as a musician, when you're making something, you don't know if it's going to hit. You don't know whether people are going to like it or not. You don't know, if it gets across what you're trying to do. So I'm just really pleased that it seems that people actually have really taken to the film. I mean, the feedback in DC when we were there 2 weeks ago, I was really nervous sitting there with a group of people for the first time watching the film, and they all, the way they reacted to it just, made me, okay by these guys. So I'm really excited for everybody to see it. And tonight's a fun night. The fact that we have community of thousands of people watching it at the same time is so cool.
Well, and I can definitely vouch for what you said. I spoke to the soldiers there. I spoke to the elected officials there, the regular people, military that were there, the military chapter leaders for Children's Health Defense. And Pam Long said to me multiple times and unequivocally, every single soldier was so happy with everything that happened. We had an advocacy day earlier in the day where we were calling to stop the COVID shots. Then we had the film that night honoring these warriors of conscience. It was a little dicey behind the scenes trying to get the Capitol Visitor Center Theater for this film. People probably don't know this, but the Oversight Committee in Congress has to approve it. It sat there for a long time. We were kind of biting our nails if we were going to be let in, but we were let in. We did have a proper showing. These men and women of conscience, these soldiers, were honored properly in a proper space, welcomed by Senator Ron Johnson, who sponsored this and brought it in. So we did good. I mean, as an organization, from your film company to CHD, to our CEO, Mary Holland, to the advocacy department, to the elected officials, we were able to show these people that they're not forgotten. The fight continues, and a number of them are actually being reinstated right now. It is happening. It's slower than any of us like, just like Bobby Kennedy is fighting his bureaucracy. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War, is fighting his bureaucracy as well, too. But everybody, just one more time, dutytodisobeyfilm.com. Get your tickets. You can still get them, I am told, up to an hour before the screenings, which most are starting at 7. You can still purchase a ticket, print it out, and show up to the theaters. Brian, before we go here, any last words, anything else you want to leave our audience with before they buy their tickets and march out to their local theater?
Yeah, we're also going to be streaming this film. We're not sure. We're not sure when. We have a few things in the fire right now that we can't really talk about, but the film will be available for everybody. If you can't get to a theater tonight, the film will be available. But I just want to say, as a Canadian. And by the way, I don't know if CHD even, if the military chapter knew that they were turning this very important American film over to a Canadian in a few you did. When I moved to the States, I just the amount of, it was strange to me, the amount of love that went to the military, because that just doesn't really happen in Canada. But now I get it, and I think anybody who watches this film is just going to get it. These people really are the best of us, and
wow,
I'm just honored to have been able to tell their story.
That's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. We saw what happened in Canada during COVID. Who saw that one coming? Nice little Canada turning into a complete draconian state. Also, people remember you can get the DVD. That's for sale now. I know it's not as in vogue to get DVDs, but I know we have our DVD warriors out there in their bunkers of medical freedom fighters for sure. You can get these at the screening tonight. You can also order them online at the website right now. Brian, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for making this remarkable film. As a fired unvaccinated worker, I deeply thank you for putting this out into the world. It's a phenomenal film. Everybody has to see it. We'll have you back on soon, Brian, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure. Good to see you.
Okay, Duty to Disobey. dutytodisobeyfilm.com. I'm excited about it tonight. I'm excited to be with my people. I know a lot of my people are going to be there in Long Island with me tonight. That's always nice. I'm going to have a bunch of DVDs for sale. If that is a way that you can help to get this out, don't go anywhere, because we are going to have Mary Holland interviewing David Rasnick, AIDS, the Unheard Voices, from Joan Shenton's archive. They're going to be showing that interview, and then a movie from the battle to tell what the real truth was, what was happening with AIDS. Who was the problem back then too? Anthony Fauci, unbelievably, for decades and decades. But first, before we show that, we're going to go out with the Duty to Disobey trailer. Let's show that.
I had a battalion commander come to me and she said, "Dear God, we're killing our own soldiers."
We gathered today to honor the incredible service members.
We owe you our thanks. We owe you our respect. And we owe you our freedom.
Just as we have gathered before to remember those who served, those who fought, and those who gave their last full measure of devotion for our country.
According to the Associated Press, the Pentagon is going to require vaccines for all service members.
I'm asking the Defense Department to look into how and when they will add COVID-19 to the list of vaccinations our armed forces must get.
The military was ordering service members to take a shot that they could not lawfully order them to take.
Are you choosing to be non-compliant? Get on the floor! Get on the floor!
Leaders did everything legal or illegal within their power to coerce and influence their service members to get the shot.
I'll never forget, I received a phone call from a mother whose son was a Marine at 29 Palms, and she told me her son and 9 other Marines were being held in confinement in the brig until they got vaccinated.
If you don't do what they tell you to do, they will ostracize you. They will destroy your life.
Stop resisting or you will get tased!
They threatened me with Leavenworth imprisonment. They banned me from all Army Public Health Center facilities for 413 days.
I counted over 140 days where I was put into isolation.
Once it becomes normalized in the military, it often very quickly finds its way into the civilian population, as we saw with the COVID mandate.
The effects extend well beyond just those in uniform, and the impact is really on the entire nation.
8,000 well-trained men and women were fired.
I lost my income. I lost my ability to feed my family.
I mean, I'm being told you're getting dishonorably discharged.
And if you get dishonorable, you lose everything. You can't get certain jobs as a civilian. It follows you for life.
You cannot mandate an experimental medical product. You cannot mandate that on military members.
In my entire medical career prior to this, I had never seen a young person with a stroke. I had never seen someone have a massive clot without provocation.
We were in great shape. We were doing very well. But then as soon after the vax is when my health went downhill.
When people celebrate all the freedoms that the military gets to grant this country, when the military's freedoms and really the country's freedoms are actually being taken away.
Why was the vaccine mandate unlawful? How come the Secretary of War is telling us that the vaccine mandate was unlawful?
We all know that the previous administration issued unlawful orders on mandatory vaccines on an experimental vaccine, COVID-19. You know it, we know it.
You are taught that you have a duty to disobey unlawful orders.
You know, they postulated that we're going to have back pay for members that were kicked out. They're inviting these warriors back into service.
And that was huge. And I was so happy to hear that. But that does nothing for the institution itself.
What I have understood from people in the military is that it has not been made easy and that it really still needs to be done on an individual basis.
We haven't stopped in 4 years when everybody was ignoring us, and we're not going to stop for another 4, 14, or 40 years.
We are at a critical juncture, and the soul of this nation is at stake.
When we talk about orders that are unlawful, now there is a duty to disobey.
Good morning, Children's Health Defense, wherever you are. It is my great honor and privilege to have with us here today Dr. David Rasnick, a great friend to Children's Health Defense, to talk about a film of amazing filmmaker Joan Shenton called AIDS, the Unheard Voices. And remarkably, this film is from 1987, so almost 40 years ago. Dave, welcome to the program.
Mary, it's a pleasure to be with you again.
Thank you. And you'll be able to watch the film right after this brief interview. So, Dave, this is a film about the unheard voices. And what's so remarkable is they were unheard voices in 1987. And I'm sad to say, I feel like there's still unheard voices in 2026. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, no. In fact, the unheard voices go back over a century. I mean, they go as far back as the late 1800s. And David Hanseman, Theodore Boveri, and just so many, many others. There's so many different reasons why that's happening. And it's just, we can go into those reasons on a particular case, for example, like AIDS, I guess.
Well, let's talk about AIDS. So the film starts with an interview with Peter Duesberg, who says basically these AIDS antibodies mean nothing. All of this research, in his view, was being poured in the wrong direction. Sadly, he recently passed away. What do you say to that, that the AIDS tests were knowingly ridiculous? They proved nothing, and that money was poured down this pit. What do you think about that?
Oh, tip of the iceberg. You can go, I was involved with Office of Medical and Scientific Justice for a number of years, the Clark Baker's legal thing. And we won a number of cases, I think over 50
I know
cases.
you did.
And most of the time, all we had to do was hold up the package insert that came with the HIV antibody test. And it said in there that that they had no authentic virus. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting it, but I could show it to people. That there had no authentic reference virus. No, in other words, no authentic HIV to validate the HIV antibody test or the PCR test. They assumed that all of those samples that were positive, they assumed, and they used the word assume in the package insert, that they were HIV positive. And of course, and then the false positives, they had a true positive rate of 100%. That's where they say we had no virus to check that to see if that was true. We just assume it. And then you had the false negative rate or true negative rate of that's my cat. Sorry, of 99%, something like that. And they say that also in the PCR test. The CDC also said it with the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. They still have it on their website. They had no authentic SARS-CoV-2 to validate their test. And that alone says everything. But you look back to scientific literature and it confirms it.
Yeah, it does. It's quite remarkable, Dave, that somehow this gets purchased. And again, at the beginning of the film, we see a young man who explains how he was so stigmatized. And of course, during the recent COVID analog to AIDS, the people who were unvaccinated became extremely stigmatized. In fact, we just put out an ebook on the stigma that was very demonstrable during COVID. How does this happen, Dave? How is it that we haven't had an AIDS reckoning in 40 years? We're aiming to have a COVID reckoning. Will they go together? Like, what is?
Well, they should.
Yes.
They should. They're all connected. I mean, it's like a fungus that's all over the place, and it's not a good fungus. It's a bad fungus.
Yeah.
They're all linked together. It's institutional breakdown. The institutions, the trillion-dollar institutions, are all connected, and that's the simplest way to say it. I don't know if the audience can see that right away. But each individual thing, it could be AIDS, it could be, for example, like polio. Turns out there was no polio virus. It was, I forget what it was, one of those poisonous things they were putting in the air. And this goes back decades. And as I said, it goes back over a century. Yeah. The thing is that it's become institutionalized. And the people who tried to do anything about it, they're trained, they're basically forced. If they want to get their MD or whatever, or go up, the higher up they get, the more pressure it is on them. Something they built their lives around, and they risk it if they go against the rules. Like Peter Duesberg, all you got to do is see what happened to Peter Duesberg, a member of the National Academy of Sciences. He had the Outstanding Investigator Grant, and in 1987 he wrote an invited article in Cancer Research that was almost like a legal document, point for point for point for point, how retroviruses in general and HIV in particular cannot cause any disease at all. Mm-hmm. And then immediately his grant support was dropped. I mean, that's what, and I was in Peter's lab when people would come, when he was in Germany, and also when he was there, and they would talk to him, even tenured professors. They said they agree with Peter, but they couldn't promote, work with him and support him on his age position about HIV, that they just couldn't do it. And of course, we knew why, because of their careers. They didn't want to jeopardize their careers.
So the film, Dave, explains that there are people who have high HIV antibodies and they're absolutely fine. They didn't have AIDS. How did the AIDS establishment, the Tony Fauci's and so on, Gallo, how did they explain that? How could you explain that if in fact HIV causes AIDS?
Well, they didn't try. They knew it was a lie from the very beginning. I was in a biotech pharmaceutical for about 20 years, and also in diagnostics division. I know a lot about diagnostics. You take blood samples or tissue samples. Normally, you'd like to treat those neat, and examine the sample as it is to give yourself every opportunity to detect whatever it is that you're looking for. And if you have to dilute it, you dilute it minimally, like 2-fold or 4-fold, something like that, so that you keep the antigen up there. Well, the package inserts for HIV say dilute the blood 400-fold, all right, before you do the test.
Oh my God.
And the reason is if you didn't do it, everybody would be positive. 100% of the people would be positive. And Asians had the least likelihood to be positive on the HIV antibody test. Caucasians, European Caucasians were in the middle, and Black Africans had the highest likelihood of having those antibodies.
God.
And they were not specific at all. As I pointed out, they had no authentic HIV to validate the test. Another thing, what infectious disease do you know that the number of people who are infected stays constant for 4 decades? The number of HIV positive Americans, according to the CDC, has been, for over the past 40 years, is 1 million Americans plus or minus 100,000. I have that on my website. You can look up the specific data. 1 million every year.
Wow, that's ridiculous, right?
It is
Infections
ridiculous.
come and go. So what about the idea of the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, is that it's a retrovirus. How is that different from other viruses, Dave? Why is that significant?
Well, I mean, I don't know. There's lots of different stories. I'm not a virologist, but these retrovirus, these segments, I'm not even sure it's a virus. The genomes for these things are in people. They're not only in people, they're in other animals. They might even be our own genes. Who knows? The thing is, they're totally harmless. And these people that were working with these things, like Robert Gallo and others, they built a career on it. He came up with HTLV1, HTLV2, HTLV3, which was later called HIV. And basically, they don't do anything. You can generate these little particles. Did you know Gallo could not detect HIV or any virus when he cultured the material, the cells that he got from Luc Montagnier? He couldn't get anything out of it. So then he treated those cells with harsh chemicals and techniques like he did with the other HTLVs that he produced, where then the cells started reacting. They were being stressed, and they'd produce these little things called exosomes. And they look like viruses, and the sizes are like 90 to 110 nanometers. You can actually see these things under an electron microscope. And but the thing is, nobody has ever found those things in a human being to this day. So frankly, I think I think these retroviruses are a fiction. That's my personal opinion. I'm not an authority on this, but I see no evidence that they're authentic or real.
Fascinating. So now that there's some cleaning house at National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, Gallo's no longer there, Fauci's no longer there, Taubenberger's no longer there, Collins is no longer there. Is there an opportunity now, Dave, in your view, to actually tell the truth about AIDS and stop the funding and change things?
I think it can be exposed, but frankly, I think, this is my personal view again, I think that the healthcare industry is so corrupt and so unfunctional and harmful that it cannot be fixed. It's just too big all the way down. The roots go way, way, way deep. My personal feeling is it's going to have to be dismantled and rebuilt a lot smaller and a lot independent little things that are focused on this and focused on that, rather than this one gigantic organization that gets billions and tens of billions of dollars every year. That's my personal opinion. I do not think it can be fixed.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, Dave, thank you so much. And please watch right now the film AIDS, The Unheard Voices. It's really, not only is it a fantastic film by Joan Shenton, but it's so remarkable that this is from 40 years ago. And here we are still dealing with that scandal while we now try to tackle more recent scandals as well. Dave, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
Pounds are being ploughed into the campaign against AIDS. In the battle against the disease, medical research has been almost exclusively devoted to defeating the now infamous HIV virus. But tonight's dispatch listens to the previously unheard voices of medical science, which say HIV is not the cause of AIDS. If the HIV theory is misguided, both research effort and money are being channeled away from the real cause of the disease, and the vilification of thousands of people who are HIV positive is not only unjust but cruelly wrong.
Steve John is HIV positive. He has antibodies to HIV, the so-called AIDS virus. He does not have AIDS, but he still suffers discrimination.
I've had a few friends who refuse to shake my hand anymore. I have a few close friends, or had a few close friends who refuse to kiss me anymore. I've suffered things where people refuse to share the same cup as me, or refuse to sit at the same table as me, or refuse. I had an incident once where some guy had an apple and I asked for a bite of it, and I presume this guy was a friend of mine. I took a bite from the apple, he took it out of my hand and he threw it in the bin. You know, that stuff. It's all very little stuff, but it hurts. That stuff hurts.
The public have been encouraged to believe that AIDS is caused by a virus called HIV.
Well, Michael, the results of your blood tests have come through, and we have found antibodies that indicate that you are HIV positive.
Now, a growing number of scientists are challenging whether HIV has anything to do with AIDS.
I wouldn't mind 1 second to be antibody positive, to be told I'm antibody positive.
If this virus doesn't cause AIDS, then the vast research effort into HIV is tragically misdirected.
Tremendous amount of money is presently being spent on vaccines against the virus. And obviously, if the virus is not the causative agent of the disease, what good will the vaccine do?
Lots of money is available to study it and has been invested into it. And it has been, I think, big business, not only for basic research. It has become a political thing and has also been a boost, I understand, for the press and for writers and for politicians.
Despite this uncertainty about the cause of AIDS, people looking into alternative theories are denied a voice.
Gradually, other clinicians are coming around and, if not agreeing, at least willing to listen. But at an official level, no one is interested, and in fact, we have been rejected outright, categorically, and at times rudely and impolitely.
It was in the homosexual areas of San Francisco that patients first started presenting with the opportunistic infections, which are collectively known as the acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Skin cancer, swollen lymph glands, a rare form of pneumonia. They started to die. These quilts were created as a massive memorial to the dead by friends and family. Young men were dying in increasing numbers, a painful reminder that money must be spent on research into what had come to be known as the gay plague. Within 2 years, an unusually short period for scientific research, a virus was declared the probable cause. In Paris, Cambridge, Maryland, and San Francisco, scientists isolated a virus now known as human immunodeficiency virus. The world was learning to live with AIDS while the gay community learned to bury their dead. The public were told a vaccine to protect against the disease would soon be found, and that the detection of antibodies to the virus would give prior warning of AIDS. Into this world, just beginning to come to terms with the crisis, Peter Duesberg dropped a depth charge. A professor of microbiology at the University of California at Berkeley, Duesberg is a world authority on viruses. He wrote a closely argued criticism of the theory that HIV causes AIDS in the leading journal Cancer Research. One of his arguments concerns the number of people who have AIDS but don't have the virus. A high number of AIDS patients have HIV antibody, but not all of them.
What's found in most AIDS patients is 80 to 90% of them have antibody to the virus. And these numbers come from those who believe in the viral hypothesis. But antibody to the virus doesn't mean the virus is there now on the virus. Certainly it means that the virus is not active at the time.
Paradoxically, the conventional test for AIDS is a test for the antibody mechanism which protects us from the disease. But what of a test for the virus itself? Is it easy to find in AIDS patients?
Free virus is never found in a patient, but what you can do is you can activate latent virus, dormant virus, in cell culture if you have an expensive setup designed to activate latent viruses. But it only works in, again, according to the same sources, 50% of AIDS patients which are antibody positive.
So while 80 to 90% of AIDS patients have antibody to HIV, the virus itself can only be cultured from the blood of half those tested, and then only in complex laboratory conditions. When looking for active virus, which is reproducing inside the body, the figure is even lower.
In only 10% of the AIDS patients, or those who are test antibody positive, has the genetic material, or the so-called provirus, I introduce the word, been detected in their cells.
Dr. Stephen Chiesa, who deals with patients rather than laboratory experiments, also finds this surprising.
In fact, there are many known cases of AIDS without HIV infection. And when I say HIV infection, I mean we lack the ability to find HIV given any of our rather sophisticated technology. We can't find antibody, we can't find antigen, and we can't even culture the virus. Increasingly, we're recognizing that you certainly can have AIDS without HIV present.
Therefore, the first argument against HIV as the cause of AIDS is that there are AIDS patients with no virus. It was in Cambridge University that HIV was isolated from an AIDS patient for the second time. The work was done in the laboratory of the University Clinical School by Dr. Abraham Karpus. He firmly believes HIV causes AIDS. We put Peter Duesberg's points to him.
Practically all people who have developed AIDS or early symptoms of AIDS have detectable level of antibodies in their blood.
In how many AIDS patients is the virus recoverable?
It depends on the technology of the laboratory. Potentially, one should be able to recover it practically from every person who is infected. It should be possible to recover the virus.
We pointed out that, in fact, this doesn't always happen.
It doesn't always happen because, as I mentioned, it depends on the sensitivity of the test employed in a given laboratory, and also it's a very time-consuming business. So there is no real time, really, to spend several weeks to a month to look for a virus, while if you do tests for antibodies, you can tell within 2 hours whether the person is infected or not.
Another problem for those saying HIV is the cause of the disease is the number of people who have HIV antibodies, that is, they must have come into contact with the virus, but have not developed AIDS. In the United States, it is estimated that 1 to 2 million people are infected with the virus.
Of those, in a given year, 10 to 15,000 develop symptoms of AIDS, and about 5 to 6 or 7,000 die from AIDS. So that is less than 1% of those believed to be virus carrier develop the disease, and less than 0.5% die from AIDS.
John Beldeckers is a biochemical immunologist from Boston. He questions whether HIV is limited to high-risk groups. He and his colleagues have been testing the blood of newborn babies in Massachusetts for HIV positivity.
What they were looking for basically was just if there were antibodies or the frequency of antibodies to HIV in the reproductive population. And what they found was that in the inner city of Boston, the frequency was about 12 per 1,000 babies born, but that the seropositivity was throughout the whole state of Massachusetts. And that indicated to the researchers that it was throughout the state. It wasn't restricted to any one group. And what it says to me, and what it says to a lot of people, is that the virus is out there in a large amount, and it's not restricted to the quote-unquote risk groups.
It shocked researchers that so many mothers and babies were antibody positive who didn't fall into any high-risk category. Simply put, if HIV causes AIDS, when there is a high level of HIV in the general population, there should be a correspondingly high level of AIDS.
To my knowledge, even though there are many babies positive for HIV in the state of Massachusetts, there really aren't many babies with AIDS. So there's a dichotomy right there. You know, how can you have a high frequency of virus and not show a lot of frank AIDS cases?
Thus, the second argument against HIV is the high number of people who have antibody but do not have the disease. Why isn't everyone with HIV positivity developing AIDS?
Or you can ask the same questions about any other infection. Fortunately, most of us have a very efficient immune system which develops antibodies to a given microorganism, including AIDS, and protect us from becoming ill.
The orthodox belief is that HIV infects the body and then lies dormant for several years before destroying the immune system. Duesberg finds this absurd.
It is dormant all the time. It never becomes active. It is dormant to begin with, it's dormant when you die from it, it's dormant when you suffer from it. There is no report in the literature describing the virus ever to be active in a patient, in a human being, only in cell culture. So it's always dormant. That is in fact one of the paradoxes of the viral hypothesis. There is no parasite that I know of among viruses and bacteria and fungus and anything that is dormant while it's pathogenic. This one is. That's one of the major reasons why I don't believe that this virus is the cause of AIDS.
The third challenge is that the virus is always inactive in carriers and AIDS patients and therefore cannot cause AIDS. In how many AIDS patients can the virus be shown actively to be replicating?
It depends on the stage of the illness of the given individual, but the fact that one can find the virus in the blood indicates that the virus is replicating actively.
The most complex part of Peter Duesberg's argument relates to the nature of HIV itself. He says it cannot cause a serious illness because it is a retrovirus. What is the difference between an ordinary and a retrovirus? Most common viruses, like flu and polio, penetrate a cell through its wall. Once inside, they use some of the structure of the cell to reproduce themselves. They reproduce in such quantity that they burst out. The virus particles are then released into the bloodstream to infect more cells or be destroyed by the body's immune system. A retrovirus, like HIV, will enter the cell in the same way as an ordinary virus, but because it is not capable of reproducing itself, it has to link into the cell's own genetic structure, the nucleus. When the cell subdivides by a process called mitosis, it reproduces itself exactly, including the retrovirus in its nucleus. So, unlike an ordinary virus, Duesberg argues that a retrovirus doesn't kill its host because it would destroy itself.
Retroviruses, unlike all other viruses, are not intrinsically lytic viruses or cell-killing viruses. In fact, they depend on mitosis, on dividing cells in order to replicate. So it's very difficult for a virus that depends on mitosis to replicate at the same time kill a cell. It would be hard to accomplish.
The fourth criticism of HIV is that it's not a type of virus that kills cells and causes serious illness. What does Dr. Karpus make of this criticism?
No, I don't agree with it. Peter Duesberg is a very distinguished molecular biologist, but I'm afraid he failed to understand the basic simplicity of straightforward cytolytic effect of a virus on a cell.
Dr. Dino Dinar directs medical research into AIDS at the Chiron Corporation in California. He supports the HIV theory despite its weaknesses.
I think that Professor Duesberg's arguments are well taken in some respects. It's quite clear that there are aspects to the pathogenesis of the disease that have not been explained, and therefore, from a semantic point of view, he's right in saying that we do not know that the virus causes the disease, since we don't know how the disease is caused. Nevertheless, transmission data and experimental data and statistical data, I think, show incontrovertibly that there is a direct association between infection with the HIV virus and AIDS development.
Is there a high level of HIV in AIDS patients?
In general, people have not been able to detect any substantial levels of virus, and that has been one of the most puzzling aspects of the viral infection itself. Reports would indicate that between 1 in 10,000 and 1 in 100,000 cells in the peripheral blood of patients can be shown to be infected at any given time.
So there is a low level of HIV in the blood of AIDS patients. Despite Dr. Dinar's belief in the HIV theory, his work appears to support Duesberg's contention that there is never a high enough amount or titer of virus in an AIDS patient to cause an acute infection.
Well, that's exactly the point. There's not a high level of, in not one case has that ever been reported. There are thousands of papers in the literature on AIDS virus, in fact, probably 10,000 by now. Not one of them has ever reported a titer.
The final major argument is that levels of HIV in the blood of AIDS patients are too low to cause an acute infection.
He doesn't have any symptoms at all that you know of. Okay, well in that case he's probably perfectly healthy. He probably has the virus, and that's all. I mean, and
it's easy to see the HIV
depending on what blood tests they've done, some of the blood,
if
they don't do the proper series
Here
of
at the
blood
San
tests,
Francisco
even that
AIDS
could be wrong.
Foundation, volunteers work night and day, calming the fears of a city which feels it is in the grip of a plague.
What do you have? What symptoms do you have?
AIDS hotline, this is Mark.
AIDS hotline.
A more political and emotional response to the crisis is given by the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, a properly formulated charity which helps people with AIDS and others in need.
Take a deep breath in right now. Breathe in deeply. Let it out slowly. Relax. Remember to keep breathing. You without rubbers, breathe anyway. In
The
solidarity
sisters
and
also promote
support.
gay rights and stage
Now, in your
performances
first
to lift the
breath,
morale of a community under
Recall
siege.
all the pain and the count of
Homosexuals
three.
were the first group
1,
identified as having
2,
acquired immune
3.
deficiency syndrome.
Pop the
They were classed as one of the 4 major risk groups, the so-called 4H club, of heroin addicts, hemophiliacs, Haitians, and homosexuals. All these groups are linked by a tendency to be immune suppressed regardless of HIV infection. Immune suppression is the basis of AIDS, which then allows fatal opportunistic infections to set in. One of the more enduring aspects of the 1967 Summer of Love is the extent of drug use in San Francisco. George Williams was an addict for 14 years.
Let me give you some
Now
of
he
this
goes out
education
to the
too.
notorious Tenderloin district
Yeah, I got
to give drug
some
addicts
people with me.
information, contraceptives,
Another
bleach.
Okay.
The bleach is to clean syringes.
All right, hang
and
on,
share
hang
is
on,
common practice.
hang on. There you go. Hey, girl. Hey, baby. What's
Hard
up?
drugs
Okay.
themselves
You don't
suppress
need
the
none of
immune
these, do you?
system, as do the many infections passed on by dirty needles.
Hey, babe, how you doing? You need bleach? Okay, here you go. Hey, oh yeah, let me give you some bleach too, man. You run out of bleach yet?
Yeah, I ain't got none.
Okay, here you go. Here you go.
Hemophiliacs need regular injections of factor VIII, which allows the blood to clot and which has to be extracted from blood plasma. Factor VIII has been shown to cause immune suppression as a side effect of its life-saving properties, so hemophiliacs can be immunosuppressed. Factor VIII is now heat-treated to remove any infectious agents, and it has never been possible to contract infection from donating blood or plasma. Others who may be immune suppressed as a result of malnutrition and untreated infections are the Haitian victims, whose island had long been used as an erotic playground for tourists of every sexual persuasion. Numerically, homosexuals are still the major group to contract AIDS in the West. 84% of AIDS deaths in the United Kingdom are amongst homosexuals. The promiscuous lifestyle of some homosexuals is said to account for this.
People who are at risk that we are constantly talking about in order to keep up the AIDS panic that's said now very frankly are those who are exposed to many other things, like the highly promiscuous homosexuals and the intravenous drug users. And the risk is extrapolated from those to the rest of the community. This is essentially like assessing the risk for driving a car by studying Formula 1 drivers, race car drivers. They go at 300 miles an hour and in a car that looks very different from the Chevy that we drive across the bridge at 55.
There are alternatives to the HIV theory, but are they being heard? Someone who was researching into immunosuppression even before AIDS is Dr. Richard Ablin of the State University of New York. He has said that HIV may not be the cause of AIDS, but just a passenger on an already sinking ship. He believes damage to the immune system must come first. He thinks he has found a cause for this prior immune deficiency in a substance in both semen and factor VIII.
We've been continuing our studies with seminal plasma, in which we suggested that the oral and rectal deposition of semen was contributory to immunosuppression in individuals who subsequently went on to develop AIDS. And we've identified in seminal plasma, among several immunosuppressive substances, an enzyme which is called transglutaminase, which we feel we have some definitive evidence which shows that this enzyme contributes to immunosuppression. We wondered why people who, as I would call them perhaps as asymptomatic heterosexual hemophiliacs, had immune profiles that were almost identical to those in patients with, as some people call, full-blown AIDS. And what we found is that an enzyme which is present in seminal plasma is also present in the clotting factor, concentrates, sometimes referred to as factor VIII.
If transglutaminase is present in semen and can cause aberrations and problems, why aren't women infected by it? Why aren't more women getting AIDS?
This is a very good question. One of the problems here is that the lining of the rectum is much thinner than the lining of the vagina, and so that one could envision that the type of trauma that might be associated with anal intercourse would be much more severe than that which could occur with the vagina.
Further work on this theory, however, seems likely to move slowly because HIV research is soaking up all available funding.
There is not money that's really available to investigate alternative causes of AIDS. It says, you know, we're told that it's available and people would tell you it's available, but when it actually comes to giving you the money and saying, you know, you've presented us with evidence that you suggest that there's cofactors that are present and that you say that there's an enzyme in semen and there's an enzyme in clotting factor, and I'll present you with the data, but I doubt very much that if anybody will then turn around and say, here's some funds to investigate this.
Thank you for calling.
In a consulting room on Manhattan's Fifth Avenue, patients wait to see Dr. Stephen Chiesa. Although they've been diagnosed as having AIDS, they believe this doctor can cure them. Chiesa argues that the cause of AIDS is inadequately treated syphilis, and he treats his gay patients for just that, with large doses of antibiotics.
The connection between AIDS and syphilis is very intimate, probably causal. Bottom line, AIDS probably is syphilis. If that's not quite accurate, then certainly it is the case that in an HIV-infected individual, that is an individual with the so-called AIDS virus, if there is no syphilis, there will be no clinical disease.
So when was the last time that happened?
Oh, it's been a while now.
Dr. Chiesa says syphilis has been poorly treated in the past through the use of the wrong kind of penicillin, which did not kill off all the organisms which cause the disease. Some remained in the central nervous system.
That's great.
It is also his contention that many cases of syphilis have never been diagnosed and therefore
Remember
never
what I
been
told
treated,
you, I want something
spreading the
in the
disease
stomach at
further
all
in the susceptible
times.
gay population.
One of the minor side effects of what we're doing is
If you say we've been inadequately treating syphilis for the last 40 years, why do you think that AIDS has appeared only within the last decade?
Probably because, as with all things in nature and in medicine, it requires a fair amount of time in order for problems to catch up with our mistakes. In addition to that, let's not forget that we may, I say may, well have a new virus that is now accelerating what would otherwise have been the natural course of a syphilitic infection. That is, I compare it to an accordion. Instead of an infection with syphilis running its natural course over 40 or 50 years, the virus may well accordionize that period of time into a few months or a few years.
Does HIV have a role to play in the disease at all?
It may be playing a facilitating role. HIV may well be playing an accelerating role. But in terms of a causal role, no, I do not believe that. Or else, why is it the case that increasingly we are recognizing HIV-positive individuals who over a long period of time, specifically now up to 5, 7, 8 years, are doing remarkably well? The cause-effect relationship between HIV and AIDS has never been established.
Some sexually transmitted disease clinics are already investigating a possible link between so-called AIDS dementia and neurosyphilis. Dr. Kaiser cautions that he has only been treating his AIDS patients with antibiotics for 6 months.
After 6 months, clearly it's too soon, but of the patients I'm treating, and we're talking about between 50 and 75 patients, thus far, again, cross fingers, 100% of them are improved. Now, over time, no one bats 100%, but 6 months down the road, we haven't lost a patient, not one patient has regressed, and in fact, all patients are better than when we began.
Chuck Ortleb, publisher of the New York Native, has always questioned the theory that HIV causes AIDS and has mounted a number of campaigns to attract public attention to alternative theories of the cause of the disease. Why is he not convinced when so many laboratories and scientists are?
I think if you started interviewing all of the scientists in those laboratories, you'd find out that there's a lot of doubt out there. They're just publicly, they're afraid to speak up because they'll be punished. They will lose their grants. They will lose their jobs. Science in America has been, at least AIDS science, is really religion. And if you dare challenge authority, you lose your livelihood. That's the way science works.
One of Chuck Ortleb's campaigns involved the possibility that AIDS could be a human variant of African swine fever. A paper was published in The Lancet noting a number of AIDS patients who appeared to be infected with African swine fever virus. Boston scientists Jane Teese and John Beldeckers carried out that research. How far did they pursue this apparent connection?
Well, I think the question should be rephrased as how far were we allowed to pursue this connection, and we weren't allowed to pursue it. There's a tremendous resistance here to pursue unorthodox scientific ideas, and even though we had good, solid proof in swine fever, I mean, it had been postulated as a possible agent in AIDS prior to HIV, so that they were beginning to work on it here. It was absolutely just excluded without any reason. They just thought it was a bad idea. They accused Dr. Teese of having wrong thinking. They accused me of being a lunatic fringe scientist, as in addition to being an out-of-the-closet homosexual. So that there was a political and a scientific agenda to prevent this going further. But that's not so unusual in view of the current political climate here in this country.
The American Defense Department has sufficient money to embark on an alternative line of research into AIDS here at the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. Dr. Shai-Ching Lo has published a paper on an unusual virus isolated from AIDS patients. HIV has never induced AIDS in a laboratory animal. Dr. Lo has managed to do this with his virus.
And it turns out that he has a virus that he isolated from AIDS patients, and he then infected monkeys with. The monkeys developed AIDS, or something that looks like AIDS, and died, and then he recovered the virus. So that seems to have shown that this agent can cause AIDS without HIV, because the monkeys were HIV negative.
One advantage of working for the Army is that Dr. Lo is free from the prejudice surrounding US Department of Health research funding. Secrecy is the disadvantage. The military authorities would not allow us to make contact with Dr. Lo. If the HIV theory is wrong, how could a mistake like this be made? How was HIV misidentified as the cause of AIDS? It is possible that sophisticated technology misled researchers to identify a harmless passenger virus as the cause of AIDS.
If you have an AIDS patient and you want to isolate the virus, you really have to go through a tremendous amount of unnatural laboratory steps to isolate the virus. Basically, what they do is take a lot of white blood cells, which presumably are infected, put them in culture, put them in a test tube, and bombard them with all types of chemicals, drugs, stimulators that in some way change those white cells and coax out the virus. Now, as a person growing viruses, I could take a cell from your body, from your neck, and under the appropriate laboratory conditions, I could coax out a lot of viruses that you in fact had been exposed to. A, that doesn't mean you are this walking carrier that's like, shedding viruses, and B, it doesn't mean that you are potentially infectious.
No one is suggesting that scientists deliberately set out to mislead. merely that a retrovirus being identified as the cause of AIDS coincided remarkably with the availability of technology which could identify human retroviruses.
When you're in the retrovirus business, you can detect the retrovirus. Then you can say, okay, now here's a new disease. Let's look for retrovirus again. We have done that before with multiple sclerosis. We have done it with leukemias. We have done it with sarcomas. And in almost all cases, a virus was found sooner or later and then said to be the cause of the disease. What was not emphasized by many of these laboratories, and that's why this program is essentially a failure, that the same viruses were subsequently always found in healthy carriers.
Most of the researchers in AIDS came from the cancer research program, which had great success in isolating microorganisms, though little success in identifying them as the causes of cancer. The cost of this technology is high, but the financial rewards are commensurate. Here at the Chiron Corporation in California, work is proceeding on the development of a vaccine against HIV. What sort of money is involved in this enterprise?
I think one can safely say that it's a very large undertaking and definitely a multi-million-dollar development. In general, you could expect that a vaccine of this type would take anywhere between $20 to $30 million from inception to final approval, and perhaps more if it turns out to be more complicated than we expect.
Health and the drug industry have traditionally been areas for big investment and immense profitability. With the world in the grip of an AIDS panic, even drugs of admittedly limited effectiveness are making vast profits. If HIV isn't the cause of AIDS, huge sums are being misspent. Testing for the antibodies against HIV is a business so profitable that French and American scientists went to court to determine who owned the patent on the testing kit. Every time a drop of blood is tested in each one of the tiny wells in this tray, it means 43 pence for the company producing the kit.
In the context of the AIDS industry, that's how those who sell the tests and those who propagate the theory or advance the theory that the virus is the cause stay important and are able to sell their products. Many of those studying AIDS virus, AIDS researchers, have companies that sell test kits. And some of those, very well known to me, are worth millions of dollars, at least on paper, in stocks in those companies. So AIDS testing for them is a very profitable thing.
Another aspect of the focus on HIV as the cause of AIDS is the way research funding is being concentrated in few hands. Abraham Karpus, though he supports the HIV theory, had his application for government research funds rejected. He's had to go to the marketplace with a testing kit he developed in order to fund his research.
A Japanese company have bought a license to produce the test, and they're doing a very good job of it. And I hope that shortly they will engage the marketing companies that will distribute it worldwide. It is already being used in several countries.
What will happen to the profits derived from the sale of the testing kit?
Well, the profit, of course, the Japanese probably will get most of the profit, but I hope that a sizable percentage would come to the UK, namely to myself, and I will use it here to generate and help in the research work. I feel that AIDS, like several other things, have been monopolized by a group of individuals who call themselves scientists, and they try to make out of it as if it is the private domain, and anybody that doesn't belong to their circle finds it very difficult to get funding, and I think this is the main reason why I cannot get support for my research.
All this could be seen as just a storm in a test tube, of no interest to anyone outside the scientific community, except that merely having antibodies against a virus which may be just a passenger is seen as a social crime.
I know of people who have been living at home with their parents, and those parents have asked their son or their daughter who has HIV to leave, not to come back. We don't want to know you anymore. I know of people who have been asked to leave their jobs, and these are people who are well, who have no symptoms and who are no health risk to anybody else at all, still have been asked to leave their jobs. I know of people who have turned to statutory services for help, help with welfare, financial benefits. 2 people went to their DHSS office to ask about benefits, and the next thing they heard was a knock on the door, and it was 2 policemen telling them to keep themselves to themselves.
In California, the fears that a panic over HIV could usher in a police state have already become a major political issue. The calm pleasures of one of the richest places in the world were disturbed in 1986 by Proposition 64, a referendum on the proposal to quarantine people who are HIV positive, even if they have no sign of AIDS. Backed by the LaRouche organization, widely regarded as right-wing extremists, the proposal attracted the support of 1 in 3 Californians. Brian Lands is one of the leaders of that campaign, which is continuing.
Under the initiative, any individual who tested positive for AIDS would not be allowed to work in or attend a public or private school in the state of California, nor would they be allowed to work in a commercial food handling establishment. We believe these are necessary steps of precaution to be taken at this point, given the fact that we have 500,000 infected individuals, at least, in California at this time.
What happens if HIV positives will not change their lifestyle voluntarily?
If individuals do not change their lifestyle, if by that question you mean will these individuals who have AIDS continue to engage in activities that would spread the disease, then those individuals should be quarantined.
Lands was at great pains to reject accusations of right-wing extremism.
I think that our opponents are the ones who are acting in a totally extremist fashion. We are proposing merely that existing public health law, as it applies to other communicable diseases, be applied to AIDS, so as to prevent the spread, the further spread of this deadly, deadly disease.
The Ray family in Arcadia, Florida, experienced attempts at containing AIDS when the 3 boys, HIV positive due to factor VIII taken for haemophilia, were thrown out of school. They suffered an arson attack on their home before a court order insisted they be allowed to go to school, but they needed a police guard. For Steve, a former drug addict, the stress of being HIV positive is profound.
I find it very difficult to talk to my friends and say, hey, look, I have HIV, and I feel like shit, usually, because being diagnosed HIV made me feel isolated, dirty, unwanted, unclean, not part of the human race no more. And why? Why is this?
People who test positive now are losing jobs or not entitled to get jobs, and many of them, I understand, go through serious depressions, in fact become suicidal because they're told they're going to die anyway in the next 4 or 5 years, no matter what they do. And that's one aspect of why I think AIDS testing is not so responsible or not so justified as it should be.
Even though the cause of AIDS is in doubt, the advice to prevent its spread is still appropriate. Drug addicts mustn't share needles. Sterile needles can't carry any infections. All people who have casual sex should use condoms, particularly homosexuals and drug addicts. These are preventive measures. How do we find the cause?
What we should really find out is what the true cause of AIDS is. And in order to do this, we have to work with the patient or go back to the clinic or back on the streets or in the bathhouses or study those who are at risk and see, in fact, what AIDS is. AIDS is not a disease entity. AIDS is a whole bag of old diseases under a new name.
For a virus that may not even cause a disease, I mean, it will make science look totally absurd. It could be a good thing in the long term because people will trust science less.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.